I definitely subscribe to, something Brene Brown said, which is clarity is kindness.
Oh, man.
Let me be clear with you. This is not okay. And I'm actually telling you this because I love you and I care for you. And I don't want there to be resentment and a grudge between us. So let me just let you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. It's very hard. There's
Yes.
oftentimes I go way too long before I'm able to have that conversation. But I know that there's only way we're going to be able to move forward and be better is if we have that discussion. If the relationship really matters to me, I have to be willing to have that honesty. If it doesn't matter, then I'll just forget about it and write you off.
Welcome to the Business Coffee Hour with William Gray Jr. On this episode, we're going to take a look at what it takes to be a young leader in the church today. And my guest is Reverend Thea. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
So pronounce your last name for me so I know I don't butcher it.
It's Curry Fuson.
Curry Fuson. Well, welcome to the show. I'm really glad to have you on. Give us a quick high-level view of, a little bit about your bio. What makes you a leader of the church?
Yes, I currently serve as the contemporary worship pastor at First United Methodist Church of Pearland. I've been serving in the United Methodist Church as a local licensed pastor and now a commissioned elder for the past 5 years. And I started at a church plant out in Manville called Redeemer Church, and fell in love with the church planting and bringing the gospel to new people. And so I've just been continuing to take some of those church planting lessons and apply them into churches that are already established or rebuilding or trying to grow, thinking about how do we reach people in a new way.
That's amazing. How's it all been going? How's it been? You honestly, when you walk in, I can see a light, that'll glow. I can see your passion come across it very clearly. So, have you had any challenges when making the transition from,
Yes.
an everyday grind to working within the church?
Definitely. So my previous career is in nonprofit management, and it's
Right.
actually when I started to follow Jesus, I realized that I had these gifts and skills that could be used in the church, and I decided, well, this is the mission that I want to be a part of. I worked for some great nonprofits, but the mission of Jesus Christ is better, and so I started to discover how might I be able to use my talents and skills in that way. And there's been a lot of great and wonderful things. I've been very, very blessed by the church and being able to work at the church and get this up close and personal view of Jesus Christ at work in the lives of real people. But there's also real people. And so things have been messy and have not always gone well. Most recently, I served a church out in West Columbia. After 2 months of getting there, they decided they wanted to leave the denomination.
Oh, wow.
Which was difficult and hard and created a lot of difficult, intense conversations. But I did my best to lead them to make a decision for them, and then had to make my own decisions from there.
Right. So it's also difficult to do what's best for others, but also calling your own plays, I guess. Like, okay, this may be what's right for you as a church, as a group, but for me, it may not fit in. But I'm going to honor my commitment to you and help you go through that. And at the end of the day, kind of separate the two. Has that been something that's pretty difficult to do? Or
Um, it's difficult as in it's not easy, it's not fun, it's not like why I got into this,
Mhm.
but I also remind myself that one of the blessings about the United Methodist Church is I'm called to the mission of the church, and I serve a local church for a time. And so that helps me stay committed to the passion and to what I feel like Jesus Christ is calling me to do my very best that I can with the church while I'm there, but then also realize they've been there long before me and
Mm.
they'll exist long after me. It's not
Mhm.
about me. And so there's many people who have raised their families in those churches. They've built those churches. They've rebuilt those churches. And so I'm with them for a moment, and I do the best that I can. And then I understand too that this will go on with or without me,
Wow.
and just stay committed to where I feel like God is calling me and to be the most honest I can be in that.
I find it interesting because I come from a military background, and for us, one of the sayings in the military, actually, we sing it in one of our songs. It's "The Army goes rolling along," and no matter what you do, whether you can guide your light as much as you want, or you can build your career there, but at the end of the day, you still have to move on, right? I'd like to backtrack just a little bit. How long did you spend in the nonprofit realm?
About 7, 8 years.
Wow. Was it locally here in the Houston area as
Yeah,
well?
I worked for Junior Achievement as well as the Boys and Girls Club of Greater
Oh, very
Houston.
cool.
Yeah, very great organizations. I
Hmm.
really, really enjoyed my time with them. Learned skills and talents I didn't know I had. And like I said, once I started to follow Jesus, decided I want to use these in a different way.
Hmm. While you were with before the nonprofit, though, what led you to that?
I
Was
just
it?
needed a job.
Yeah.
I had spent a year overseas as a full-time volunteer in the Czech Republic
Wow.
from 24 to 25. And when I got home, I needed a job, and Junior Achievement was hiring. And so I was an administrative assistant. I did that within a couple of months. I knew this was not my calling. I did not want to do this. And so I quickly looked for other opportunities within that organization. And I became what we called a program manager, and I had
Uh-huh.
a range that I got to work with schools and get them excited about the program, and then work with companies who would be volunteers and financial sponsors of that program.
So what did you learn about yourself within the nonprofit realm? Like, for instance, for me, I learned when I used to work at a nonprofit too for veterans, I learned how good I could be at
Yeah,
networking. I didn't realize that was an actual skill where I just like, oh
yeah.
yeah, everybody can do that. But learning a script and what to follow, and it kind of led me down this course, right? So I think there's a lot to come about when you actually put yourself in that service realm. So what's something that you took away from that you learned?
Relationships.
Mm,
When I would make a cold call, I would have a 1% chance of someone answering and saying yes. But when I was able to build a relationship with a school, with a company, with a teacher, with my contacts, then those calls were answered, and they usually were very fruitful. And so I learned that you just got to put in the time and build the relationship authentically. And so I really cared about what was going on in their life. I really cared that they were having a baby. I really showed compassion for whatever the school was dealing with, and also really work to fill a need versus push my agenda and what I wanted. And so I'd have conversations with schools specifically and say, what do you need? How could we actually be a service to you versus just coming here and pushing what my bosses are pushing me to sell?
mhm.
What is it that you see your students needing? And those actually led to some of the most innovative and exciting projects I got to work on.
Right. It sounds like curiosity is a big part of it too.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to understand not only our overall mission or what we're trying to achieve, but how can I actually serve?
Yeah.
What kind of leads you right back down to the path of continuing to serve in your capacity now.
Yeah.
Very, very um, inspirational, I would say. For me, I always make the connection. There's service. There's service. If you
Mhm.
just go and serve, you may not like the word sales, but it's what we're doing. You're selling yourself. You're selling your services.
Mhm.
And so, how did that experience with nonprofits really bring you closer to serving within the ministry now?
Well, I remember one time we were hosting an event with high school students, and I was leading part of the presentation. And afterwards, my husband was like, "Wow, you should do this for a living."
Wow.
And I said, "I do. This is my job. I lead these type of things all the time. Those checks we get every other week, this is why I get them." He's like, "No, for real." And I was just kind of like, he doesn't understand my job. He doesn't understand what I'm doing. But as I actually happened to have just joined a church with two female preachers at the time, pastors, as I watched them, speak and lead every week, I started to see those similarities where, again, I could get up in front of a group of executives and share this point or this project we want them to get a part of, or even just to celebrate this thing that we were able to do. I saw how they were doing the same. They were leading the church through these moments of both celebration as well as casting vision and inviting us, the people in the church, pews, to follow. And that's exactly what I was learning how to do in at Junior Achievement in the nonprofit world. And actually, there was an opportunity to apply for a vice president role, and my colleagues and peers were like, "Oh, you got it." And I remember being like, I just can't. I
Mm,
just knew that if I even took that step, I could easily get sucked into staying there. And actually, it was about a year and a half later, I quit my job completely
wow.
and took 6 months off to figure out what it is I'm supposed to do, which I ended up taking a part-time a position at the church out in Manville, a church plant, and got
Okay.
to build something brand new.
Wow. How does that conversation go between you and your husband?
Yeah, my husband is fantastically supportive. He's the most encouraging and kind man I've ever known. And so he knew, I actually called him had a bad day at work. And after ranting about it for 30 minutes, he said, "Well, if you need to quit, just quit. You don't need to talk to me about it." And as soon as he said that, I felt like a big weight was lifted off my shoulder because I felt very stuck that I had to do what these people were asking me to do that just really went against my conscience. And so when I got home, I was like, "I think I'm going to quit." And he was like, "Okay." And we talked through that. And then I told him, I don't just want to get another job.
Mm,
I know I'm employable. I know I have great skills. I really want to figure out what's next. And he said, "Okay, but I want to see progress. Like, I want to see you doing something." And I remember it was like 6 months to the day that I had quit. had spent a lot of time at the gym, had spent a lot of time in, prayer and conversations. And I told my friend I was leaving the gym, I said, please pray for me because I got to find a job. Like I'm sick, my 6 month timeline is up. And that's the day that I found the position out in Manville,
Wow.
to be a part of what God was doing out there. So prayers were really answered because
Yes.
we were dipping into savings way too much. It was time to
Right.
like make a new plan.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit. I think finances are such an important part of
Yeah.
leadership, especially when you step into that role. So, what were some of the things that you did to make sure that you did have a big enough savings? Just curious, you know, you
Yeah,
don't have to
well,
go into
that's
minute
okay. Well, we didn't.
details,
This
but
wasn't planned. It was really spontaneous, just out of frustration and feeling like I wanted to find something new. Up until that point, my husband and I were debt free. We had
mm,
been, we had worked our debt snowball, and so we'd already had made a life that was comfortable. We weren't borrowing, we weren't in debt, and so that really helped. We did have about 3 to 6 months of emergency savings in
hmm
place. So we started to use that. And I did take odd jobs. I worked at the rodeo
oh,
that
cool.
year, and it was awful and
Oh man.
exhausting. And I actually worked as a intern out in Lake Jackson 3 days a week. And so we were getting by. The first couple of weeks that I was off, I remember keeping all the lights off during the day while I was at home by myself because I was trying not to like add expenses. But then we also just had that conversation. He said, I don't need you to act that way. I need you to take this time to really figure out what's next so that we can, build our future together.
Well, that's very
So just
empowering.
open conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a very unique individual too, and to be so in tune with you, I can see why you're so connected. And just hearing you speak of your husband, it gives me something to strive for as well. Like, am I paying attention to the cues? Am I in tune
Mm,
with what she's saying? You know, we've heard it said many times, like, and keep going back to this one quote, and Henry Cavill was talking about it. Right, he plays Superman, and he
mm,
says he found this list and from this older man, and it says like one of the things was 90% of your happiness is tied to the partner you pick.
mm.
You know, and one of our past guests said the same thing. One of his
Yeah.
top three lessons was find a good person
Mhm.
to do that. Do you have any advice for picking out a partner that you know will fit you? I guess.
Yeah. I don't know about advice. I know my husband is definitely very different from me in so many
Mm,
ways, and I really never understood like the yin and yang until a couple years into our relationship. And what I really notice more is that I am usually like on a 17. I'm very high energy. I'm very excited. I'm ready to do and conquer everything. And he's very laid back. I'll never forget, we had seen Gary Allen, his all time favorite. We saw him like 5 times in one year. And one year we're 3 rows from the stage. And Gary Allen is right there. Like we could probably jump up and touch him. And my husband is standing like this. And I'm like, aren't you having fun? Oh my gosh. And he goes, yeah. And he's just so calm. And I realized more and more, well, at first I'd be frustrated. Why aren't you having fun the way I have fun? Why aren't you showing your enthusiasm like me? I realized if he was on a 17, we would be explosive. And when I'm angry and upset, he doesn't rile me up. He doesn't get there with me. He stays calm. Even if he agrees with me and he believes that I'm right to be upset, he doesn't kind of meet my energy. He constantly keeps this low and steady tone that is so comforting. And so I just start to appreciate those differences instead of thinking that there's somehow an attack on me or that I need to be more like him. No, like I get to be me and he's really great at being him. And that's a really good pair. And so just accepting that
mm,
and celebrating that more than wishing he was different.
right, right. That's powerful stuff. So how do you keep a balance between your home life and then now your worship life? You know, I'm sure there's some parallels, right? But also, I'm sure there's some challenges. So how do you keep that balance?
Yeah, well, again, we communicate a lot. We
Mhm,
check in. How are things really going? And we also really try to make time for each other and understanding that sometimes there's a season where there's not a lot of extra time. But then there's also seasons where there are. And something that was been really great is over the last year and a half or so that it was pretty stormy at work. At home, it was great. It was
mhm,
this calm, and we've learned how to be each other's anchor and know that no matter what's happening out in the world, we can always come here, we can always be safe. And this also can be a place where we can have fun and we can laugh, where we can be the most vulnerable and not feel like we have to continue to fight the battles we have to fight out there. This can be a place of peace and love and joy. And that doesn't mean we don't disagree, But when we disagree, we deal with it and we try to talk about it as quickly as we can, knowing that some of us are ready a lot sooner than the other person, and
Hmm.
that's okay too. But we continue to keep showing up and having even those tough conversations so that we also can enjoy a lot more. We don't have these resentments that I think marriages are so good at holding on to.
Yeah, I think they can be. I think you're right. There's a big misconception too that just because you see the couple always happy doesn't mean that there's not problems. It's just they have a different way of dealing with them and not allowing them to
Yeah.
build. And one of the things that I always turn back to is how am I taking care of myself,
Yes.
right? Because there's two halves of this relationship, and
Hmm.
am I can't look outward as much. Well, what am I doing for me? So what do you do for yourself? What kind of self care do
Yeah.
you?
So that word self care is interesting. I think it's very it encompasses a lot. I definitely strive to work out. I'm a CrossFitter, and that's very very important to me. Also, really strive to eat the best that I can. I've learned that how I feel when I eat junk is I feel junky, and
Mhm.
so I really strive to eat real food most of the time. Also, strive to get that sleep because it's really important. So just kind of saying I'm worth this. I'm worth taking care of these basic needs. But then also just I make sure I get away and have time with girlfriends. I make sure I have time by myself, whether that's a run or a walk or just sitting and then also taking care of myself of standing up for myself and not allowing other people to push me around or to undermine me or overlook me and those kinds of things as well. So just really deciding that I'm the number one person that's going to take care of me, and I'm going to teach people how they're going to care for me as well.
I have to really applaud that. I have to teach people how to take care of me. I think there's a lot to unpack there. So, what have you noticed that you have to tell people like this is what how I need to be fed? And I'm going to give you an example for mine.
Yeah.
For me, I'm a very big connector.
Mhm.
So a lot of times I'll put folks together, and I've noticed that if I make a connection. And I sometimes, if I don't get credit from that, I'll feel slighted,
Mm.
right? Even though I mean,
Yeah.
even I get it,
Yeah.
but it's also being aware of that. Hey, this is what
Yeah.
upsets me for whatever reason. My voice, my style is if I connect to people, I like for them to know that I was the one that connected them.
Yeah.
So for me I have to be very cautious and vocal of that, and just I share as much as I can. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
this is one of my triggers. I don't It
Yeah.
is what it is. So how do you show people to take
I think that's key. People need to know they can't be held accountable for expectations they're unaware of. And
Mhm.
so my undergrad experience is in early childhood education. And so when a 3, 4, or 5 year old, even now, puts their hand in my face, I quickly say, I don't like that. Please don't do that to me again. If they yell in my face or throw a toy at me, I tell them I don't like that. This is not good for me. I've even done the same with 7 and 8 year olds who were talking over me in a Bible study session. I said, "Okay, guys, this isn't fun. I really want to leave, but I can't because it's my job to stay with you. You're not focusing. You're not talking about what we're talking about. You're all over the place. This isn't good." Just letting them know, like, this is my experience with you. And I find that often when I'm willing to share my vulnerability and my experience, at minimum, people are willing to at least hear it.
Do you find that being more direct is helpful, like addressing the
Yeah.
issue right away?
Yeah, I do. Especially in the church.
Mm.
We're really good at being nice. And I think I definitely subscribe to, something Brene Brown said, which is clarity is kindness. Let me be clear with you. This is not okay. And I'm actually telling you this because I love you and I care for you. And I don't want there to be resentment and a grudge between us. So let me just let you know.
Mhm.
It's not easy. It's very hard. There's
Yes.
oftentimes I go way too long before I'm able to have that conversation. But I know that there's only way we're going to be able to move forward and be better is if we have that discussion. If the relationship really matters to me, I have to be willing to have that honesty. If it doesn't matter, then I'll just forget about it and write you off.
Right. And that can like go even further down, especially if it's somewhere at work,
Yeah.
right? If I don't care about this relationship here at work, then it tends to be like, well, I don't care about going into work,
Mhm.
and really bringing my all, which I know I can create that
Mhm.
change. You are a woman in the church. What kind of difficulties has that been, and how have you really found your power through that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I come from a nonprofit world where I didn't realize that men and women were still treated differently
Mm.
in the world of work. I had, tons of colleagues and peers who were strong, leading women, and nobody seemed to think differently about it. And then when I got to the church and started to step into roles of leadership beyond children and families, just a whole nother set of responses and clues and cues where people were kind of, in my opinion, a little overt with their feelings about it. On one hand, I have to learn to just accept that. And it's okay if you don't think that I have the authority to be here, if you're not okay with this. That's okay. I'm going to love you enough to let you hold that. But when you challenge me or you begin to like spread that idea, then we have to try and talk about that. At first, I would be very offended by some of the ways I interacted and experienced that. And then I just started to realize the more I was fruitful, the more my sermons were compelling and
Mm.
convicting, the more my leadership was effective and fruitful, those things really went away. And so my best defense is just to be who I am and let their minds be changed.
Right. And I also, what I hear is I can see you as we talk to the more the confidence that you're getting, you're also building all this evidence that, hey, look, I am giving compelling sermons here. I am teaching the lessons. I am valuable. And now when you look back, it's like it doesn't matter what this one person thinks of me. I have a whole list of things that
Yeah,
I've been able to do and create by stepping into my own courage.
right, right.
Uh, so what is a can you describe a time where you've made like one of those tough leadership decisions and how you actually navigated through that?
Yeah. So, I mean, most easily, again, recently in West Columbia, there were definitely some folks who were very vocal about their position to leave the United Methodist Church. And so, which is fine. They're welcome to have that opinion. But some were paid to be
Hmm.
on our staff. And so I just had to like confront that and say, you are welcome to have your opinion. You're welcome to believe what you believe. You're welcome to vote the way you want to vote. However, at this time, you're currently being paid by the United Methodist Church to support, this church and what we're up to. And so I'm going to ask you to be a little more mindful of your words and how you're sharing this information and your attacks on people who might be thinking differently. It didn't go well. It was rough. This person's mind was not changed. I don't believe their behavior was changed.
Right.
But as a leader, it was my job to say, again, to clarify the expectations. This is not okay. And I wasn't made aware of anything else.
Wow. I think that's a heck of a challenge, really. And I feel like a lot of folks deal with it too. It's like, how can you badmouth the place that is providing you the means to do the things you want to do?
Yeah.
You know, can we? Because again, if it goes back to the military, it's like, how can folks really badmouth the
Mhm.
army for what it is when they accomplish so many great things?
Mhm.
Or you can just it could be a
Yeah.
poor leader here and there, and it brings me back to the old saying where folks leave their bosses, they don't leave
Mhm.
their jobs,
Yeah.
they leave their bosses.
And I think something, not only paid positions in the church, obviously pastors, but staff, but then also just as a Christian, um, we have influence. And every action, every word, every way that we behave, especially publicly, the world is seeing.
Hmm.
And they already have a pretty good case against us. And so there's a part of me too that just says, hey, as a Christ follower, as one who is supposed to be sharing this message of good news, let's reevaluate how this is being taken. Let's reevaluate. I can see your heart, but let's also look at the way that the world is going to see this and understand that you're just giving them more ammo. You're giving them more reasons to hate us and call us
Right.
hypocrites and to want nothing to do with us. And so often I have those kinds of conversations as well, just like we have a higher calling.
Hmm. That that's powerful. I think we're also giving someone to. It's so hard to turn the other cheek. Is kind of what we're going towards, right?
Yeah.
Even though we may see the bad or we may hear things going, it's like how.
Yeah.
What are some ways that we can stay grounded in our faith um, to deliver this message?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that to turn the other cheek. There's a theory that in the ancient times, they didn't wash their hands after going to the restroom. So each hand was used for one thing and the other hand was used for everything else.
Right.
If you get what I'm saying.
Hmm.
And so if someone were to slap you on the cheek with their non-restroom hand and you turned the other cheek to them, they would have to use their other hand. And what they would have to do is see you as an equal. They would have to treat you on the same level. They couldn't treat you as less than. They would have to see you as that equal. And so I think there's also that element is not only being willing to, it's not only about forgiving and forgetting, but it's also to see others as equals. That it means our enemies. They're humans. They have problems. They have bad days. They make mistakes. They have a whole life you know nothing about. And while that's not necessarily, again, makes it okay, and it doesn't make it easy, but I think the more we can see the humanity in one another, the greater chance we have toward any type of peace, to any type of coexistence, just to see that humanity.
Hmm.
And then, I mean, the whole thing about Jesus Christ, this God incarnate, took on the human flesh and so if we can see Jesus that way, can we try and see those who we may want to hate the most with that same eye of humanity?
We mentioned Brene Brown earlier, and this reminds me of they're doing their best they can, right? I'm trying to extend the grace to them to let them know that they're doing their best with what they have, and that really helped me a lot
Yeah.
when it comes to family
Yeah.
issues or at home or at work. I try to give them that extending the grace. They're doing the best they can with what they have. I don't know everything that's going on,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, I like the idea of I'm going to stand here. I'm going to meet them as a person again,
Hmm.
and say they're doing their best,
Yeah.
and we'll make decisions from that.
Yeah.
that's a that's a really great point. I'm gonna make sure I come back to that and read that and watch that again too. um, so as we begin to wrap up, what what advice do you have for women who want to be more involved in their church or want to step into more of a leadership role?
Yeah, just take a step. I always tell my churches we don't have a database that tells us all of the gifts and skills and secret talents and desires of our churches. Just because you haven't been asked, it just means someone hasn't thought of your name yet. And so step up and offer and say, where can I serve? Where can I help? If you have specifics, that is always great. As a church leader, I get lots of feedback. And very rarely is it someone asking to be a part of the solution. And so, I'm sure there's something that your church needs. And so step up and step in. There's no rules and parameters that you got to be perfect. The Bible shows us so many times how many times God calls very imperfect people, men and women, to step up and to step into what God is leading. And so be willing to do that. I mean, have a conversation with whomever you trust the most at church and say, where can I serve?
Right. I think that's fascinating. There's definitely ways that we could all be more involved, especially with the church, but in different ways within our community too. There's plenty of needs out there. You have a certain set of skills, you have
Yeah.
talents that we need to make sure they are being put to use, and let's find ways to do that. And so I do want to recognize you and thank you for coming on. This has
Yeah.
been a wonderful conversation. So many sound bites. If somebody's interested in staying in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so I preach every week at New Song, which is a contemporary service over at First United Methodist Church of Pearland. On the website, there's links to my email. You're welcome to reach out to me directly. I'm not on socials, but I love a good direct phone conversation or meet for coffee. So definitely open to that.
Coffee or tea now?
Yeah.
Yes, open up our tea game. And so to kind of round this out, what are three lessons that you would like to give to young uh, Thea back then?
Oh,
So someone's getting ready to embark on their own journey.
yeah.
What are three lessons that you would like to
I
share?
think trust in yourself. Trust where you're feeling called, trust your passions. I believe that we've all been uniquely designed for divine purpose. And so being willing to look into that. And then I would also say, like you mentioned, curiosity, ask questions, lean in, get to know more people, and just have trust. It's all going to work out. It might be a rough and wild ride, but in the end, God always prevails. So have a little trust in that.
Ooh, have trust. I love it. Again, thank you for coming in. I want to recognize you. I don't take it lightly. I want you to know that I can feel the energy, right? I'm not like a psychic or anything, but you can feel it. You know, when you walk in,
Thanks.
you really do. You've brightened up the studio. You've really brought it today, and I really thank you for being present and recognize you for who you are and all you've shared. I appreciate it. It's been phenomenal. And for all of you, be sure to give her a follow. Go visit and tell her we sent you. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. Please leave us a review, share us a comment, and let us know how you plan to get involved. You're welcome to follow me at WGARAYJR. That's at W Garay Jr. We appreciate your time. And as always, I love you guys.